I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Welcome to News du Jour. You may be wondering, why am I, Annie Bowles, here hosting this podcast? I usually start by telling people I'm a political baby. You see, my parents met working on Capitol Hill. By the time I was 2, I had been in my first political commercial and even got lost crawling around the West Wing. Don't worry, Al Gore found me. My family then moved abroad when I was 9, and I attended an international school in Brussels with kids from all over the world. And it is this type of global perspective that I also bring to our show. I graduated from American University in DC after studying political science and art history, as well as interning on both sides of Capitol Hill. I even interned down the hall from where my parents met. I'm now pursuing a professional certificate in journalism at NYU in conjunction with Rolling Stone magazine. I guess I was always that friend in the group who cared deeply about not just what was going on politically, but also globally. I often kept my own friends informed through high school and into young adulthood, so I guess I've always done a version of this show. I'm genuinely passionate about following the news, and I'm here to break it down for you guys every weekday. We always strive to be a calmer space to get your news. Or, as one listener put it, like getting your news from a well-informed bestie. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, guys, so I have a bonus episode for you today. A Georgetown University student reached out to me to ask some questions. She's studying journalism, hoping to have a career in journalism, and she wanted to do one of her school projects on our show and on me and how I got started. So I was super honored and, of course, said yes, answered her questions. But as I was typing out the responses, I was thinking, I get asked these questions every single time I'm interviewed, every single time I run into a fan and we get talking. So I thought these might be questions that you guys were curious about yourselves. I threw a poll on our Instagram, on my personal Instagram. Sounds like you guys are definitely interested. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll read out her question and then I'll read out our response, my response, and that's going to be this bonus episode for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Let's jump in. So Grace's first question for the interview was, what is your background and how did you get into journalism? This was by far the longest response I gave, just as a heads up. So I said, I studied art history and political science at American University in DC. During that time, I also interned on both sides of Capitol Hill, thinking that that's what I'd like to do after graduation. If you guys remember, both my parents interned there, so I thought, it's going to be such a natural fit. But I actually found the environment to be really different from what I imagined and not a good fit for me. So this sent me into a bit of a spiral because my plan had kind of fallen apart. But as they say, sometimes good things fall apart so that better things can fall together. I've always loved style and fashion, so I moved to Dallas after graduation and worked as a personal stylist. It really engaged my creative side, and I slowly started building a platform on my Instagram. But I was always talking about Capitol Hill and news alongside my style content because that's something I'm just genuinely interested in. And I found my following really enjoyed it, actually. It was something they weren't seeing on other creators' platforms on Instagram. I then got diagnosed with a stomach condition called gastroparesis, and it made it really hard to work in any traditional office setting. So I decided to take a chance on my blog / Instagram work at the time, and I developed Sugar Free Media. Moving home to Oklahoma, I was registering women to vote, and I heard more than once one woman saying she didn't know enough to vote. And That broke my heart. As I marinated on that comment, I realized that she was not engaging with it because she didn't have access to it. Women here have an abundant access to news. They were not engaging with news because they either felt it intimidating, overwhelming, or stressful. When I would ask women, that was the response I was getting. And that's how News du Jour was born. I started the podcast during the pandemic, and the rest is history. I really sought out to address that problem. It was a roundabout way to get into journalism. I wish I just studied journalism at American, which is a phenomenal journalism school. You know, NPR produces their show out of our campus, but I didn't shoot straight to this career. This is how it unfolded. Grace's next question was, what motivated you to start Sugar-Free Media and News du Jour? So serving the modern woman to uplift, inspire, and encourage her is my sole motivation. But as I said in part above, getting information easily into the hands of busy, overwhelmed women, that is also my motivation. Statistics show that societies improve when women in particular are better educated. So that is my goal, to help her stay informed in spite of the many things she juggles on the day-to-day. Her next question was, what are the advantages slash disadvantages of being an independent journalist? Disadvantages would be having to work for free or a very low wage as you're starting out. If you're building your own platform, the hardest piece is growing your audience rather than creating your show or content. You are completely reliant on yourself for where your next rent, mortgage, and next meal is coming from. But the advantages, for me at least, are numerous. You can cut your own path. You never have to take an assignment you don't like. And the sky's the limit for how much money you can make if you are willing to put in the work. Next question from Grace was, how do you decide what news to cover on your podcast? This is the most common question I get asked, and the answer is very simple. I look at every news story I can find that day, and then I ask myself, what does she need to know about today to be the best informed version of herself? I start there, and then sometimes I will try and balance out an episode where possible, not solely covering politics or conflict, but also discussing pop culture, art, archaeology, human interest stories, etc. Anything of interest to the modern woman is fair game on my show, and I think that's what really sets us apart for her. What is making the podcast like? It's so fun. First, I research, again, gathering my stories, then select my stories for the day. But this can shift depending on breaking news. So I always sort of have to stay, as my dad used to say, bend at the knees, be ready to pivot. I am always ready to shift my podcast episode based on breaking news. Then I write the entire episode out after selecting my stories. And then once my son goes to bed, I allow time in case any big stories break or write a little bit more. And then I record in my home studio, edit the show, draft my show notes, schedule it to go live. I do 3 versions of our show. The regular podcast with ad slots, then a Patreon version that is ad-free, and then a transcript version for our website for those who would rather read. Grace's next question was, what does a day in your life look like? As a mom, that, sort of dictates all of our day. But I like to start my day early before my son is awake. I get up around 5:30 to 6 a.m. I have my coffee. I get organized for the day and start knocking off a few to-dos. From there, I take care of my son. I get him up, I get him dressed, I get him fed, I get him off to school. My husband definitely helps throughout this process, but, this is something I wanted to take on as a mom. I then either work from home or at a coffee shop while my son is at school. I do administrative tasks or shoot special social media content in the morning, and then shut down and start creating the podcast about noon every day, following the procedure that I outlined before. producing the show. And then I pick up my son about 2:30 p.m., spend quality time with him, do dinner, bath time, and then my husband puts him to bed while I record. If I'm being honest, it's my dream life. This is something that I always wanted, a life where I could really prioritize my child and really balance my home and career. So this is my dream life. I also try to attend networking events as much as I can. I'm not great at this, and it's something I'm working on right now to ramp up, because I was a lot better about it when I was younger and didn't have a family. So I'm ramping this back up, but networking events help a ton in order to promote the show and basically meet people around Oklahoma City for collaborative projects, interviews, things of that nature. For example, we have a short series coming out this spring. I'm going to cut it off there and not tell you guys about it, but we're helping to champion also domestic violence related legislation through our platform, in addition to our daily show. You guys know about all that stuff. So we don't just do the news. Grace's next question was, what are your hobbies outside of journalism? Which, between a family, running my own business and chronic illness, I don't have a lot of time, but I love to cook. I love growing fresh food in our garden. That is a big thing I do every single spring. I'm about to get started with that for the year. I am sick off and on, so I do have to take it easy more than I'd like to, but connecting with friends, hiking, traveling, and of course, spending time with my son and my rescue pup are a few of my favorite activities outside of work. Her next question was, what are your goals for Sugar-Free Media and News du Jour? I'm being transparent here with this, but I have big dreams for Sugar-Free Media. I'm hoping to grow a team here in Oklahoma City, produce a couple other podcasts under this umbrella, and hopefully own an office space for our company. My absolute dream would be for Sugar-Free Media to be one of the biggest media groups outside of LA and New York City, but a small team is our realistic next step. So that's what I'm working towards right now, and hopefully we will get there when the show is a little bit bigger. Grace's next question, and last question, what advice do you have for up-and-coming journalists, especially women? It's hard because I haven't worked in a traditional newsroom or for a newspaper, so I don't have that perspective. But my biggest advice, given what I do, is to find your why and really fight for that through your work. Why are you a journalist? What are you bringing to the world with your words? Don't be afraid to break the mold, and don't just cite your sources, but investigate every source as well. Can't emphasize that enough. Could not be more important now with all the technology coming forward to just muddy the waters for us. If you follow the truth and accuracy above all else, you can't go wrong. Be honest, be transparent, follow your moral compass at all times, and find and fight for your why. And that's our bonus episode for today. I hope these answers were insightful or helpful for you guys. If you like this type of content, definitely slide into my DMs and let me know, or even reshare our episode. That would mean the world to us. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use to listen. A rate and review on that platform or a shout out on social media would mean the world to us and help us to be able to keep creating the news du jour and reach more people who need a calmer space to consume the news. But the best way to support all of our work is to become a patron at www.patreon.com/Sugar-Free Media, and that is also linked in our show notes. You can follow us on social media at newsdujour.podcast on both Instagram and TikTok. You can follow my personal account at It's Annie Bowles on both platforms as well. Any little noises you may hear in the background are my rescue pup. He has a little separation anxiety and always records with me. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from Oklahoma